This morning, we're going to be not starting a new topic, but we're going to be starting from the beginning of statistics. Since we're in a funny situation with me not being able to go to school, you guys are in different places, I want to try and find a topic that will have a series of small steps that we can concentrate on in different lessons. And so we're going to be studying statistics for a while. And we've already talked a lot about statistics. Recently we talked about the standard deviation, and we used the formula for standard deviation. But ultimately, over the next 2 weeks, I think it'd be great for us to go back to the beginning and study every single part of statistics with a view eventually to be completing a statistics project. And the project can be on a topic of your choosing. But before we do that, I want to go through a series of steps. So the first one I want to talk about is data. I think all statistics start with some sort of data, and then you analyze the data, you use individual statistics to work out what the data means. But just this lesson on Wednesday, I just want you guys to think about different types of data, because depending on what sort of data you've got, you have to analyze it in different ways. So first of all, let's split it into two categories, right? So for data, and that's just individual bits of information that can then help us to analyze the world, really. But data can be split into two groups. And those groups can be qualities and quantities. So qualities are descriptions of stuff, and quantities are numbers. These are very much two different types of data. So these are generally words, and these are generally numbers. But actually the words, they could be sentences, or they could just be people's names, or they could be colours. They can be more than just individual words. They can be, I don't know, entire paragraphs, really. But we call this quantitative data, and this is, this is qualitative data, and this is quantitative data. The two words look very similar. Let me just write those down. So we have qualitative. Spelling is going to be my strong point. And those are descriptions. For example, you could have, use a smaller pen, you could have colour, or names, or countries. Okay. Quantitative those are the numbers, right? And those numbers could be two different types, actually. Qualitative sort of covers a whole load of stuff. But quantitative numbers, they come in two different styles. You can have numbers which are measured and numbers which are counted. And those, you've probably come across these before, but you have things which are continuous. Those are things which are measured. Or you have things which are discrete. Discrete data are numbers which are counted. And there's a subtle difference between these two things. Continuous and discrete is something we're going to talk about more. But the first thing to do is to split data into these two different things. Things which are either words or numbers. And those are qualitative or quantitative. And that comes from the word quantity, and that comes from the word quality. So we're splitting them into those two different groups. Okay, so if we want to go more into this detail about discrete and continuous, it's helpful to have some examples. All right. So I'm going to put down different types of data, and then we're going to talk about which one is counted and which one's measured. Some of them are obvious, some of them are not obvious. So let me just put some data down here. We could have age. We could have height. We could have time taken. Let's time's running out. We could have your name. You could have place of birth. You can have all sorts of different things. Weight. It could be, I don't know, hair colour. And some of them are really obviously things you measure. So you definitely measure height. You definitely measure weight. Okay? Those two things are definitely something that's measured. So that's continuous data. That's continuous data. Something which is obviously a word, name, that's going to be qualitative. Place of birth, again, that's a word, so that's qualitative. So those two things are qualities. Whereas time taken, you would measure that. If it was like time taken to run 100 meters, that would be continuous. That's definitely something that you measure. Hair color, again, that's qualitative. Age is a funny one. Age, most of the time if people ask, what's your age? You have just a label, something that you could count on your fingers. But actually your age could be just considered as something that's measured in time. So age, you can actually choose how you want to treat it. You could treat it as continuous, or you could treat it as discrete. So it really depends on the context. And as a statistician, you can choose to decide how you treat things. So data can be split into these different groups. You definitely have qualities and quantities, and then the quantities themselves can be either something that's measured or something that's counted. Something that's counted, some discrete data, is usually quite obvious. These are definitely things you can count on your fingers. So, I don't know, number of people. Number of fish, that sort of thing. How many siblings. These are all things which are not measured with an instrument. They're not timed. They are not something you use a meter stick to work out. They are something that you count. Whereas continuous, generally, you have things which you're measuring with a ruler, or measuring with a stopwatch, or measuring with some scales. So something that's continuous could be height, weight, time taken, maybe something like density. All of these you measure them on a scale. These have decimals in general. You can spot the difference between the types of data. These are generally decimals, or have decimal elements to them. These are definitely more often whole numbers. And these can be counted, whereas these ones are measured. Okay, and this is the main grouping of data. You go all the way back to what we talked about first, which is qualities and quantities, and then quantities themselves can be split into numbers which are discrete and numbers which are continuous. Once you get beyond this, there are different ways of classifying data. You can classify data not just by the type of data, but how it was collected. So, I suspect you and primary data is stuff that you've collected yourself. And there's different advantages to these two different things. It depends on what you're doing. For primary data, you know you can rely on it. If it's something you've collected yourself, you can be confident that you know where it comes from. You can be sure that it's done properly. You know, if somebody else has done it, secondary data is where you've got the data from somewhere else, like the internet or from a book, or you know, somebody else has done the hard work. Secondary data is someone else. So primary data, you know it's accurate if you've done your job properly. Secondary data, you can't trust it. But primary data takes a long time to collect, especially if you're collecting like thousands of different bits of information. If you're doing a survey, for example, this would take a long time. Whereas secondary data, it's really quick and easy to find. You can just get it, use it, analyze it, do whatever you like. So there's different, good things and bad things about both. Primary data, hopefully, it's accurate. You can be confident with it, but it's time consuming. Secondary data, you can't trust it. Well, you can't really trust the accuracy. And on the plus side though, it's quick to find. And these are the sort of pluses and minuses of the different things. Eventually we're going to be doing more and more analysis of data, but at the moment we're just trying to describe what these different things are. So we've got qualities, we've got quantities, we've got primary data, we've got secondary data. These could be any type of data. This could be qualities or quantities. This could be qualities or quantities. But the difference between these are you've collected them, somebody else has collected them. Once you actually have your data, it's collected in different ways, and you have two different ways you can get data. You can ask everybody, or you can collect all the information. If you did that, that would be called a census. And a census, really, it just takes every single person or every single thing in a population and then analyzes everything. And again, like primary data, that can be time consuming. On a smaller scale, you can do a survey. And a survey means that you're sort of analysing a smaller group of a population, and then you're using that to make inferences about the larger group. So a census would be very time consuming, but very accurate. A survey would be quicker, but maybe not so accurate, especially if you didn't ask enough people. But there's, again, pluses and minuses of these different things. This is everybody. It's who you're asking and who you're getting the data from. A survey is just a small group, so it'd be a sample of people. A sample of the population. And if you're going to take a sample of the population, you have something which is called a sampling frame. A sampling frame is a list of everybody in the population, then you select people from that list. It's not always appropriate, but it might be useful. Oh, there's a lot of noise over there. A sampling frame would be a list of all the different people you could possibly ask, and then you choose a sample from that sampling frame. And a sampling frame might be like a list of everybody in the entire country, which is not very practical. People used to use phone books or electoral registers, but a sampling frame is a list that you then select people out. And how you do that, how you select people, can make a huge difference in the accuracy of your findings. If you selected just the first 5 people, then it might be biased. You're trying to avoid bias in your data to try and make sure you're collecting accurate data and then using it and finding like genuine results. But before you do anything with data, you have to consider what is it you need, where are you going to get it from, how much time have you got. You might not have time to do a census. Nobody's got time to do that. You might have to do a survey, but how are you going to do it? How are you going to make sure that you have good data? Do you have enough time to get your own primary data? Or can you rely on somebody else's work? And once you've got your data, what sort of data are you collecting? Because if you collect this sort of data, there's only a limited number of graphs you can draw. The analysis of discrete data is quite simple, whereas the analysis of continuous data is more complicated. This allows you to do things like histograms, cumulative frequency, something which is more interesting. These ones, discrete data, the best you can do, I don't know, are simple diagrams, maybe bar charts, pie charts, that sort of thing. Same goes for qualities. If you've got quantities, you can do loads of stuff with it. Qualities less so. You can't really analyze that so well. So it really depends on what data you collect and then what information you can find out. So this is the first step of what will be a longer series of videos where we're going to look at statistics from different angles, and then I want you to do some work afterwards. So after this video, you'll see instructions on your homework for what to do next every time. And what I want you to do is to do some work on My iMaths on this subject. So you don't need your textbook, it doesn't matter where you are. And hopefully this will work out. Let me know what you think. And you can always ask me questions by email and Skype if necessary. So, brilliant.